Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3355. Yeah, 56 maybe. I'm not really sure. Today's date is 10th of March 2025. It's been almost like 9:46 p.m. Okay, what exactly happened today? Okay, so today I make a design regarding about. Okay, yeah, okay. Uh, I'm gonna ask a couple of questions to you. Not couple of questions. I'm gonna kind of like a giving you couple of names. Okay, yeah. You have to kind of like a simply imagine, or you just have to kind of like a think that ki who is a terrorist. Okay, yeah. And or the answer of you is actually your opinion. Okay, yeah. And these are kind of like a simply made up name. Okay, yeah, like it's not really associated with any kind of like a simply real event or real person. And if it kind of like a simply associate, it might be kind of like a something like 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 I don't know how do I supposed to say. Okay, yeah, but these are the words are I made up. You just have to kind of like a guess which one is the terrorist. Okay, yeah. uh okay. Dan Cooper, first name Dan Cooper. Another name is Ravi Kishan Yadav. Third name is Abu Al-Bakra Bagdadi. Fourth name is Sunipa. Okay. If my opinion, like basically, if someone asks me this question and what would be my opinion, what would be like that ki I think that ki who is a terrorist, then I might think that ki Abu Al-Bakra Baghdadi, option number third, is a terrorist. Okay, yeah. Now I ask this question to myself that ki why I kind of like a think like that way. Like why? What is actually reason? Okay, yeah. Okay. I am not a kind of like a somebody a very philosopher. I'm not really kind of like a somebody I don't know. But these are four names are associated with some certain things. Okay, yeah. If I'm gonna say Dan Cooper is a kind of like a somebody name associated with the English community of the people. Okay, yeah. And mostly English community are resonate with the Christian. Okay, yeah. Because US, Europe, these are kind of like a Christian community. So I think Dan Cooper. Okay, yeah. Another name is a Ravi Kishan Yadav. Ravi Kishan Yadav is a kind of like a somebody Hindu name. Okay, yeah. It represent India. Okay. Now Abu Al-Bakra Baghdadi is a kind of like a somebody a Muslim name. It represent Islam. Okay, yeah, Islam or Muslim kind of like a somebody community. Sung Shi Pa is a kind of like a somebody such a name which is resonate with the Chinese or Japanese or kind of like a South Korea, something like that. Alright, yeah. But why I say that ki Abu al-Bakra Baghdadi is a kind of like a some terrorist? Well, let me tell you one thing now. Ki usually is this thing that ki my entire life I've been seeing as a terrorist as a kind of like a some Muslim people. Okay, I'm not kind of like a targeting only like a Muslim kind of community. Definitely not. No, nothing really at all. I'm just like this is my perception. Okay, yeah, and that perception is came from the information that I consume from television, from news media, from social media, and from every point of perspective. I think that Abu al-Bakr Baghdadi is a kind of like a some terrorist. Okay, yeah, and this is not just my opinion, by the way. Okay, I asked this question to my friend. He also give the same answer. I asked this question to my sister. She also give the same answer. I kind of like a only okay. So where is this kind of like a came from? Okay, yeah. So today I kind of like a simply make a design regarding about okay, it's really hard to explain this thing in audio format. Okay, but it's a kind of like a some image regarding about a kind of like a Muslim woman. Okay, yeah, she is actually kind of like wearing this hijab. Okay, if you don't know hijab is a kind of like a, simply a black cloth. Entire body is actually covered by the black cloth, and only the eyes is kind of like a something uncovered. Okay, yeah. So that is called hijab. You probably seen that particular stuff. Okay, yeah. And then basically what I did is that ki like basically is this thing that ki I put kind of like a action camera slit. Okay, what's the camera slit? So in the movies they have kind of like a something like a slit which kind of like you actually seen that thing like a 3, 2, 1 action, and there is a guy who actually kind of like a do the slit thing like a claps or whatever it is, claps. I don't know what exactly things, but you probably seen that in the movie making process there is a kind of like a somebody slit, you just clap it and then action will started. Okay, yeah. And in that particular slate it kind of like a put the name as a kind of like a um, something really that ki, uh, only the television who are kind of like a replicate such a image, like yeah, like let me tell you one thing regarding like let me like how do I supposed to show you in this audio artifact episode. It's a kind of like a something is this very difficult, but like let me tell you one thing, you are kind of like a listening this thing uh, in like a the only way that you are actually listening this thing is because I am kind of like suddenly became very kind of like a very strong person or very successful person, then and only then you are kind of like suddenly listening that particular moment. Okay, yeah. So if you are listening this thing and if you wanted to kind of like resonate with the things that I would say right now, you need to be see that particular photo. Okay, yeah. I'm not really sure that in the future I might have this photo or I might delete that, but I make sure that I will not gonna delete that. But it's kind of like a giving you really right message. But yeah, okay. So I upload a kind of like a some photo on Instagram at like a today's date is a 10th of March 2025, and I upload a kind of like a some photo regarding about there is a girl in hijab. Okay, yeah. In front of it there is a kind of like a camera slit. Okay, yeah. And in that particular camera slit I wrote that, can television be fair to the Muslim? Okay, yeah. Like you just have to go through that particular image. Yeah, like I like go in my Instagram account and stuff like that and just look that key at 10th of March 2025 I upload that particular photo. You just have to see that photo first. Okay, then I'm gonna talk right now. Okay, yeah. So regarding about when I asked this question to myself that key, okay, first of all let's describe this image. Okay, what is actually this image kind of like a tell us. Okay, yeah. So where is this came from, like how I started this thinking like that. Okay, yeah. So today is Ramzan. Okay, Ramzan is a kind of like a something a festival in the Muslim community. I am not a Muslim, by the way, and I didn't have any information regarding about Muslim and Islam, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. But is this thing that ki today is a Ramzan, and basically in this particular festival they actually kind of like do fasting and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. It's not really that much kind of like a something. It's a Ramzan. Okay, it's a really good festival, by the way. They just kind of like a something share their like add pray and stuff like that to their god Allah. Okay. So basically I wanted to kind of like make a some sort of create a design regarding about that particular topic. Okay, so how do I supposed to make that thing? So I was kind of like looking at kind of like some inspiration on the Pinterest, and then I see that particular photo. In that particular photo there is a girl in hijab, and like a basically exactly kind of like a some design that you are actually seeing on my Instagram profile. Okay, they exactly design that I'm kind of like a seen on Instagram, sorry, is seen on Pinterest, and I was kind of like something influenced by this design, and this is really great. Okay, so I kind of like a something create such a design by my own. Okay, yeah. So I kind of like went to the kind of like figure it out that PNG. I download some PNG on the Instagram on the internet and stuff like that, and I create this design. Okay, yeah. And basically is this thing while kind of like creating this particular design, I was actually asking this question to myself, is it true that ki like basically is this thing that ki the all the bad people are Muslims? Okay, yeah. Like, yeah, let me tell you the first question that I told you right now is that ki, who are those kind of on those four people who are kind of like somebody terrorist, and you and me, and basically from every point of perspective every person are kind of like giving the same answer. Okay, yeah, like Abu Al-Bakra Bagdadi is a kind of like a something a terrorist person. And why I'm saying something like that, because usually in my upbringing process, or in my kind of like a something influential point of perspective, or in my information consumption process, I usually kind of like a seen as a Muslim people or Islam people is a kind of like a something associated with a bad activity, okay, like a killing people or something like that, okay, yeah. And this is kind of like a some information that I seen on the television and something like that, okay, yeah. But is it kind of like a something right, okay, like basically should I supposed to be ask this question to myself that is it right, is it kind of like a something always true? Because let me tell you one thing now, being a bad person is not associated with the religious, no. It's a kind of like a something human thing, means like that na ki if I'm doing something really good, okay, yeah, it's kind of like a something human thing. If I'm doing something really bad, it's also kind of like a become a human thing. It's not associated with the religious and stuff like that, definitely not, okay, yeah. But then why we actually kind of like a somebody seen as a Muslim people or Islam people are kind of like associated with the bad stuff? Why, like, is there any kind of like a someone is kind of like a somebody manipulating me? Or yeah, because let me tell you one thing now, I will gonna give so much example regarding about how Christian community of the people do something really bad thing, or Hindu community of the people do something really bad thing, or any kind of like some people kind of like do something really bad thing. It's not associated with the religious, it's not associated with any kind of like a stuff. But mostly like if I'm gonna say regarding about the crime point of perspective, I usually resonate with the Muslim kind of people. Like I might think that ki this might be kind of like something really wrong, without any kind of like a looking at the background check and without any looking at thing. I just think that ki this is kind of like a Muslim guy, then he might be a kind of like somebody a criminal or stuff like that, okay, yeah. So why am I thinking like that? Is someone is kind of like somebody manipulating my thought process or something like that? So it's something that, okay, yeah. And then I think that is it right, is it kind of like a somebody someone is manipulating? Then I kind of like sort of figure it out some sort of problem, and then I don't know, yeah, am I be manipulated or not? I'm still not really sure, okay, because okay, why I'm actually asking this question, okay, yeah, okay, okay, why not Ravi Kishan Yadav is a not terrorist? Okay, why not? Like basically is this thing na ki the information that I consume regarding about this the word, okay, like basically if I'm gonna say Ravi Kishan Yadav is a kind of like a some person might be associated with the Hindu community of the people, okay, yeah. I'm not really sure, but it might be. I'm not a Hindu, but still is this thing that I think that this person is kind of like a something from this particular kind of like a some people, like a Hindu community of the people, okay, yeah. Now if I'm try to create a particular image regarding about Hindu community of the people in my mind, then what would kind of like some image that I creating? A person might be kind of like a somebody devoting towards the god and stuff like that, okay, yeah. Because I think that na ki Hindu community of people are kind of like a something associated with the gods. They are kind of like a praying the god, or they are kind of like a, yeah, like I am actually kind of like a consuming, I'm kind of like a somebody imagine this kind of like a somebody image associated with the Hindu community of the people. Why? Because I think that this is kind of like a something I seen as a Hindu community of the people. They are kind of like a doing such a thing like a pray to the god and stuff like that, okay, yeah. Can I try to imagine this Ravi Kishan Yadav is a kind of like some terrorist? Basically, am I kind of like trying to imagine that this Ravi Kishan Yadav is a terrorist? I am not. Okay, yeah, because like basically in my mind, I kind of like a think that no, Ravi Kishan Yadav is not a kind of like a something a bad person or something like that. Without even knows that this Ravi Kishan Yadav is a good or bad. Yeah, but my kind of like some intuition kind of like a saying me, my gut feeling it kind of like a saying me this thing ki this Ravi Kishan guy is not a bad guy, okay, yeah. It might be somewhat little bit bad regarding about his decision choices and something like that, but it's not really that bad so that I would call it as a terrorist, no. So like basically is this thing that ki Ravi Kishan Yadav is not bad guy. So yeah, like no, okay. Now let's take the another name, Dan Cooper, okay, yeah. So why I'm not kind of like a thinking that Dan Cooper is a kind of like a only person who is something really a bad or kind of like a somebody terrorist, okay, yeah. So I'm trying to digging the thinking about why I'm not kind of like a considering as a Dan Cooper is a not a terrorist. So I was kind of like a thinking, then I realized that ki I don't know. Yeah, usually is this thing ki Dan Cooper, this kind of like an assembly name are associated with the mostly US kind of like people or Europe kind of like assembly people. Like this kind of like assembly person who's associated with this kind of like assembly country. Okay, yeah. And another thing is that na ki yeah, Dan Cooper might be a kind of like something a terrorist, but it's just like that na ki like I'm not okay. Like basically is this thing it like basically my gut feeling, my intuition is kind of like a thinking that key like a Dan Cooper might be 30% criminal or kind of like a 30% or kind of like a terrorist, but 70% not. And one why what is the only reason for I'm actually thinking that ki why 70% is not he is a terrorist? Why? Is because of that na ki usually is this thing this name what exactly I'm thinking about if I'm gonna say this name what I'm actually thinking about that a kind of like a somebody a Dan Cooper is kind of like a thinking that he might be a kind of like a somebody a person from US Europe. Okay, yeah. Maybe he's kind of like a somebody bad person, maybe, but it's not really that bad. Okay, same thing happened with the Ravi Kishan Yadav. Yeah, like maybe just like that na ki he might be kind of like considered to be a little bit bad, but not that much. Like should I consider to be a kind of like a something like Abu Al-Bakra Bagdadi? No, nothing really at all. Okay, so it's not okay. Yeah. Now fourth example that I told is a Shung Shi P. It's a very hard to kind of like pronounce the Chinese and Japanese name for our point of perspective. But if I'm kind of like thinking that that Shung Xing P is a kind of like a simply a person might be a bad person, it's not okay. Like still, let me tell you one thing now. From like usually Chinese or Japanese kind of like some people, I create such an image who are kind of like somebody very peaceful. Okay, yeah, like they might be a kind of like somebody asshole, but like might be like basically I'm thinking that na ki might be those people are also a bit wrong, but I also think that ki they are 30% wrong and 70% are good person. Okay, so from third like basically from every option that I'm trying to thinking like a Ravi Kishan Yadav, Dan Cooper and Shin Shupa is a kind of like a something categorized in the same thing in the same kind of like a something people who are kind of like a considered to be a little bit bad but not considered to be a kind of like a something terrorist. But when I heard Abu Al-Bakra Bagdadi, I just quickly thinking that no, this guy might be a kind of like a something a terrorist. And why I'm started thinking like that is that na ki basically the televisions and the social media and the internet and the news media and everything everywhere is kind of like a something really create a such a image that he Muslim kind of like a some community are bad kind of like a Sunni community means like that he like okay, I'm not kind of like a somebody creating any controversy regarding about my thought process. This is my thought process, might be I'm completely 100% wrong, definitely, and you just definitely have to blame with me, but I just have to understand that ki why I think like that, why I kind of like a something think like that ki this Abu Al-Bakra Baghdadi is a kind of like a somebody terrorist. Why I'm kind of like a somebody I'm so sure that 70% he is a terrorist, 30% might not. Okay, why? Like basically this kind of like a thought process is not resonate with the previously three names that I mentioned, like a Dan Cooper, Ravi Kishan Yadav, and Shing Shupa. I never really think like that. But when I heard this name, I just quickly realized that oh, this is the guy that might be a kind of like a some terrorist. Okay, yeah. And the reason is that usually the media, the kind of like a something, the television, the internet and everything is kind of like a somebody giving me such a thing. Okay, yeah. Then I look that usually is this thing if I manipulate. Okay, yeah, if I manipulate by the television, if I'm manipulated by the news media, if I manipulate like yeah, I'm kind of like accepting this thing that yeah, chalo, like basically is this in television is kind of like a manipulate way to me to think like that way. Okay, yeah, but not all the media na, like there are so many kind of like some medias are kind of like a I don't know. Okay, I am still not really sure about any kind of like I don't want to talk about any kind of like somebody religious who is kind of like somebody doing something. No, nothing at all. I don't want to talk about that. I know. Definitely not. Okay, and I don't want to kind of like somebody create any kind of like some controversy stuff like that. But I think that I was kind of like manipulated. Might be. Okay, yeah. Or I'm not really sure. I'm thinking very deeply regarding about like a like why I kind of like sometimes na sometimes I just think that sometimes na our brain are kind of like a simply assume some certain thing that might not kind of like a something exist over there. Example, okay, like I'm giving you example regarding about my thought process why I think like that, and most of people are also resonate with my thought process too, but still, yeah. um if I say that I found a kind of like a something really a planet on the universe which is look like Earth. So what kind of like a assembly image that you are creating in your head? Probably, yeah, kind of like a look like Earth means like you actually seen the Earth on television somewhere else. So you are kind of like imagine the same kind of like a something image in your head. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. But in reality, okay, yeah, in reality, okay, yeah, it look like Earth, yeah, it look like Earth, but it's not in circle or sphere. No, it's in square format. The entire planet is in square format. So do you believing that like this square planet like is a hypothetical question, but it's a kind of like, do you believing that a kind of like a square planet which look like Earth? No, you are not. Okay, yeah, it feels wrong, right? It feels wrong. Your imagination feels really right, but reality feels wrong, right? Like a basically when I asked this question, I found a kind of like some planet which look like Earth. You imagine a kind of like a something Earth like planet, okay, in your imagination. But in reality I found a kind of like a Earth like planet, but it's in square. It's in square. This is the reality. So your brain are kind of like a simply not accepting the reality, and you are kind of like a simply try to thinking that no, my imagination is right. Your brain is actually thinking that my imagination is right, and you are kind of like a stick with that imagination. No, like a might be you are kind of like a simply thinking something very wrong, or kind of like a looking at in very something very different thing. But planet might not be in square. Definitely not. Okay, yeah. Earth like planet shouldn't supposed to be in square. So you are kind of like a something hoping that your imagination is always be a right. Okay, this is the same thing happened with the previous example. Means like that ki Dan Cooper, Ravi Kishan Yadav, and Sunipa, I kind of like a something imagine that ki these are kind of like a something not wrong people. Yeah. But when I heard Abu Al-Bakra Bagdadi, my head is kind of like a thinking that no, this Abu Al-Bakra Bagdadi is a kind of like a something terrorist. If I'm giving all the kind of like some evidence regarding about those like a Dan Cooper, Ravi Kishan Yadav, and Shingsupa are kind of like a terrorist, but it's just like my brain doesn't really want to accept that thing. No, my brain is actually thinking that no, that Abu Al-Bakra Baghdadi is a terrorist, and I'm kind of like a sticking that thoughts, and I am trying to thinking that this is kind of like a something real. So this is what kind of like a something happening. My brain is kind of like a something figure it out that what is right, my imagination or my reality. Okay, yeah, and this is what kind of like a something our brain is kind of like a choosing, because our reality is a kind of like a something such a thing that very different, very kind of like a unique, that like it's not really hard to consume, it's a very difficult to consume that particular information. But my imagination is a kind of like a something such a thing which is kind of like a somebody easy to consume that thing. Okay, yeah, so that's why my brain is kind of like a thinking that ki Abu Al-Bakr Baghdadi is a kind of like a terrorist. Okay, so yeah, like basically this is, when I creating this particular image now, this particular design, I was kind of like a thinking that ki, am I doing something wrong, or am I doing kind of like a thinking it bad? I don't know, yeah. Like it's I still don't know. Like I don't know how is this thing good or bad, or I don't know. It's like that I am stuck in that particular stuff and I'm still not really sure about that. Okay, yeah. But I think the design that I make is kind of like a true or right, or it's like it doesn't really have any problem. Like it's a, yeah. I don't know. Yeah. It's a kind of like a really very controversial question, but still. Okay, it's been 25 minutes. I haven't really asked a question to myself, so probably let's just ask. Okay, yeah, like let's just quickly go through it and okay, yeah. What is exactly the question? Wait, like basically is this thing na ki yesterday I record artifact episode, but I record artifact episode during the morning. During the night, I try to improve my binary code structure script or whatever it is, but I don't know, like yesterday I was kind of like thinking or something else, so I am not really sure. Okay, so what is actually question? Wait, let me go through it. Where is this question, dude? Okay, yeah. Question number 29. Okay, if you could design a perfect city, what would it look like and why? Oh, that is really good question. Okay, where is this question came from? All right. So a couple of days ago, I was actually watching the Demons of Leonardo. It's a kind of like a something web series. Okay, yeah, and it's a kind of like a something web series. This web series actually belongs to the uh, Leonardo da Vinci. If you don't really know Leonardo da Vinci, he is a kind of like a something the person who draw world famous painting Mona Lisa. Okay, yeah, and he's not just a painter. He is not just a painter. He is a master of multiple things. He's really great. While I was watching that particular show, I was bitterly influenced by his thought process. The way that Leonardo thinks was like a really incredible, really incredible. I wanted to think like him, so I went to the Chat GPT and asked that he suggest me such a question so that I would think like Leonardo da Vinci. And this is one of those questions. The question says, if you could design the perfect city, what would it look like and why? Okay, yeah. Okay, so this question is really resonate with me a lot. Okay, yeah. Okay. So a couple of year ago, not like like just maybe 2 year ago, 2.5 in year ago maybe. Okay, so I was like I am kind of like a basically gaming content creator. Like I used to make a kind of like some gaming content creation. Okay, yeah. And in this particular, like I kind of like I play a kind of like a assembly game. Okay, the name of the game is a City Skyline. Okay, I play this game which is really good. Okay, so what exactly is this game? So this game is kind of like a something you have to make the city of yourself. Means like that whatever the city that you are actually thinking, you have to make that city. Means like everything, like basically the roads, the school where it will be, the theater, the stadium, the people, the residential, the commercial area. You have to be think, you have to make a bridge, make a kind of like a something a rail connection. You make your bus stop, railway station, airport. You could kind of like a you like a basically whatever you could imagine as a kind of like a some city that you should supposed to do it, it all be there. Okay, yeah. And as also the game is actually designed in such a way that it is like a really good, like a basically is this thing you could explore your creativity through this thing. Okay, I played this game and it was really good. Okay, so what is exactly my perfect city look like? Okay, yeah. So in my thought process, I kind of like a something make a kind of like a something video regarding about city skyline, and I make a kind of like a something circle city. Okay, yeah. So what's a circle city? A circle city means like that a kind of like a something a circle. Okay, there is a like a in the kind of like a median, in the kind of like a middle, it's a kind of like a something mountain, or it's a kind of like a something statue, but it has to be kind of like a something big. Okay, yeah. Then around there is a kind of like a something a circle. Okay, yeah. That circle means a road. Okay, yeah. And then there is another road, there is another road. It's a kind of like a simply ring city. Okay, like a ring city or circle city, whatever it is, but it has a multiple kind of like a something circles. Okay, yeah. So in this particular circle, in this particular ring city, it has a multiple thing, like a basically in like a basically it's a circle, means like 360 na? Okay, yeah. So in 360 there is a kind of like a somethingly like a take the four like a basically is this thing, you just have to kind of like a cut in half, cut in kind of like a fourth part. Okay, so basically is this thing, you kind of like a make a circle and create the fourth part. So you could kind of like a something imagine it's a kind of like a something 90-degree 90-degree kind of like a something, this 90 degree, this 90 degrees, 90 degrees, like around 360, this is the 90 degree. Okay, so there is a 190 degree is it's kind of like a something meant to be a park. Okay, means like that there is a park, there is a garden, there is a fountain, there is a lake. It's a kind of like a something, everything is kind of like a something really in there is a nature thing. Okay, yeah, like it's completely nature thing. There is no, it's a kind of like a solely park that it doesn't really have any kind of like assembly, any industrial thing. No, it's a very beautiful park and people will kind of like assembly go there and do their stuff. Okay, yeah. Then another quadrant of that particular circle is kind of like assembly residential. Okay, yeah, means like that people actually living. Okay, residential plus commercial. Okay, yeah, residential plus commercial means like that ki commercial means like that people who are really required some sort of grocery needs or daily needs, they are kind of like a get there. Okay, yeah. So basically one quadrant of that particular city is a kind of like a for a kind of like a simply residential or commercial people. Okay, yeah, so that people who would live and people who would kind of like a something buy some sort of daily stuff. Okay, yeah, but it does not, this kind of like assembly area does not belong to the office area, does not belong to the any kind of like assembly industrial area, no, nothing at all. The people who actually only live there. Okay, like basically residential and commercial, that commercial only that commercial place means like that ki you could see daily needs or kind of like a item that you really required in daily life. Okay, that's it. Okay, but not any kind of like a office area, not any kind of like a industrial area, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah, this is like another quadrant. First quadrant is a park, another quadrant is a kind of like a something residential and commercial area. Then basically is this thing, then there is a kind of like a something office area. Okay, another quadrant is a office area. In this office area is a kind of like a something associated with a very big office, like a really big, like a big office, or as also educational institution, and then colleges and schools and office area is kind of like associate in this quadrant, which is kind of like a really good. Okay, yeah, because in this particular thing people are kind of like something seeing a very big building regarding about their offices, and the educational institution is also be there. Okay, yeah, and it's a very big building. Okay, yeah, like I'm kind of like a design as a kind of like something very big design. Okay, yeah. Then another quadrant, yeah, like a first quadrant is a park nature stuff, second quadrant is a kind of like a residential, third quadrant is a kind of like a some office and educational stuff, fourth quadrant is for kind of like a entertainment purpose, means like that a stadium, then kind of like a some park, then kind of like a something clubs, in kind of like a something hotels, in kind of like a something zoo or theater, or all those kind of like a entertainment required some sort of things is kind of like associate in that particular stuff. Okay, yeah, as also is this thing, people will also kind of like a commercial area also be there, and some sort of residential area is also be there, but mostly it associate with the entertainment purpose. Like this kind of like a quadrant are only associated with the entertainment purpose, means like that ki people would come, people would kind of like spend times and things like that. Okay, yeah, as also is this thing, these are kind of like only four quadrant, kind of like a create some sort of ring circle or circle city is kind of like a connected with the roads. Okay, yeah, but the third quadrant that I mentioned was in the park and things like that, which is kind of like a something very nature thing. It doesn't really have any roads, means like that ki road should supposed to be underground. Okay, yeah, road should be underground, and the all the metro and things like that is kind of like a something over the bridge. Okay, yeah, it's not kind of like a something like disturb in the nature things. No, it's kind of like something over bridge, means like that all the metros and railway stuff is kind of like something over bridge, and all the kind of like something roads are kind of like something underground or over the bridge. Okay, like basically is this thing, if you kind of like make a road over the bridge or kind of like underground, this might be really good, but it does not kind of like a something messing with the nature stuff, nothing really at all. No, nothing really at all. Okay, there is nothing really any kind of like a something like that a really good thing at the floor. No, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah, and at the center is a kind of like a something meant to be a kind of like a mountain or kind of like a something something like a kind of like a decorative design, but it has to be kind of like a something really big, so that people are kind of like a something see that thing. It's a kind of like a ring city, and it's a kind of like a something circle. Okay, yeah. As also is this thing that key industrial area is really essential for growth of that particular city, means like that where is the power came from. And basically the industrial area not only kind of like a somebody serving the power, but as also is this thing the water refining, then residential, then kachra. Okay, like basically if there is a kind of like a something happened with the kind of like a something, means like that na ki uh, regenerative kachra. What's a word for kachra? Like a kachra means like dustbin, no, a kind of like a something. I've just forgot the word for a kachra. Okay, yeah, but it's just like that now. All those kind of like some plants or are kind of like away from the city, means like far away from the city, means like that people would go there and kind of like simply do their stuff, but with kind of like a something. Like it could generate the revenue. Okay, not only revenue, but it could kind of like a create some sort of like a jobs for the people who are actually living in residential area or any kind of like assembly area. So yeah, so this is kind of like a some image that I'm kind of like a something imagine, or kind of like a perfect city that would be look like it's like that. Okay, yeah, it's a kind of like a some skyscraper building at the office area, or kind of like a something the residential area, and then a park and things like that. This would be kind of like a looks really good if would be kind of like a something available. But those cities are actually available, like a basically Moscow. Okay, Moscow is a kind of like a something really good example as a kind of like a something ring city. Okay, it's not kind of like a something exactly a ring city, but mostly is this thing it associated with a kind of like a something ring, means like the entire city is actually built up by the kind of like a something as a ring structure. Okay, which is really good. But mostly in this particular city, in Moscow city, it doesn't really have any park and things like that. If I'm gonna say one of the well designed cities might be a New York, because New York is a kind of like a some city which is kind of like a somebody comes with a really heavy traffic of people, but still it has some sort of fresh breathe air in the Central Park, which is really good, which is actually in the heart of the city, which is like a really great. It felt like wow, it felt like the New York City is one of the my best city, as kind of like a somebody design point of perspective, as a visual point of perspective, and as a kind of like a somebody living point of perspective. Not living point of perspective, because there is a some sort of flaws in the New York building, no, in New York City too, but it's not a flaws. It's a kind of like a somebody there are so many people are actually living in that particular city, so that's why it kind of like somebody create a some sort of hassle. What exactly is this thing? Okay, first thing is that ki the New York is a kind of like a something kind of like a something at some certain like the average temperature over there is almost like a 10 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius, mostly 10 to 20 degrees Celsius. Okay, and in the winter it went to almost like a -1, or maybe like a basically the like a the average temperature of the New York is almost like a 15 to 16 degrees Celsius, which is really good. In winter it might get almost like a 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, but which is really good. Okay, the temperature was really good. Okay, yeah. One of the biggest problem is that na ki in the summer, like basically some of the like a high class building are made up by the glasses. Okay, yeah. So these are glasses are a kind of like a reflect the sunlight. Okay, yeah. So what do you mean by that? So yeah, when you went to the New York in the summer, then it might be kind of like a something very difficult, because in the summer it might get temperature maybe like a 30 to 35 degrees Celsius, but you could feel even more warm because of the kind of like a something glass building, because glass building is kind of like a reflect the sunlight. So basically whatever the heat that you are actually feeling because of the sun is also one thing, and another thing is that the reflection of the sun, which is kind of like a create a very dangerous, because sometime it kind of like a something creates so much amount of heat at the kind of like a something floor. This is kind of like a something very something at a wrong design, I think that. Okay, another thing is that ki usually the New York is kind of like a something a city where all those kind of like a something houses are in the building or stuff like that. Why? Because of that key, like a basically it has a kind of like a something FSR value is high. What's the FSR value? So FSR means floor, like how much floor it should supposed to be have in one building. like basically there is some sort of regulation is actually happened from the government, is that ki, when you have too much amount of floor, then it might be kind of like a something very dangerous for the city and dangerous for the city. Why? Because let me tell you one thing, na, if you have kind of like a something so much tall building, then it kind of like a something that ki, the resources like a basically the all the kind of like a something the people who actually living in, like basically you could fit multiple people in very small area, because the people are actually living in above, okay, like basically on top of each other. Okay, so you could fit so many people, but the problem is that now it kind of like a create the shadows, it kind of like a create the shadow in another building. So that means that ki, like basically if you could see the sun, that means you're behind the back of the building will not see the sun for rest of the time. Yeah, like they will not get any sunlight even if they have windows. No, because of that ki, you will get the shadow, like your building is kind of like a creating the shadow for another building, which is something is somewhat bad. Because of that the temperature of the New York is always kind of like a something less, and those people are really required kind of like a some sort of sunlight to get little bit of heat. When it have kind of like a big building, then probably getting the sunlight is a kind of like a something very difficult for the people who actually getting some sort of shadows. It kind of like a depend on, but dude, like let me tell you one thing, na, sun is actually moving na, so sun is actually moving means like that na ki, sun is not in one place na, so your city is always kind of like a rotating, so you will get the sun na, like basically at the morning you will get like this, the position of the sun is over there at the horizon, then it went to the top, then you will get the sunrise, you will get a kind of like a some sort of sun during the afternoon. Yeah, you might gonna ride, but probably is not the distance between the one building to another building is a far too close, so that means the shadow will not kind of like a something stay away, like if there is a kind of like a something, I don't know, but shadow is always be there. Okay, there is also one problem, another thing is that na ki, all those building are kind of like a something so close to each other, means like that na ki, the windows are like a never really kind of like a something serving a some purpose, means like that ki, usually when we have kind of like a window in building, that you might kind of like a consider that ki, behind this kind of like a window that you might gonna see really beautiful skyscraper and things like that, but nothing really at all, there is another building too. So and those are building are so close to each other, that means like that ki, the shadow is also the problem. But another thing is that ki, it doesn't really have any kind of like a privacy, probably, I'm still not really sure that, but still na ki, this is something that ki, I don't know. As also New York smells really bad. Like I never really went to the New York, but it's just like that na, the people who actually went there and people who actually live there, they are kind of like somebody say that ki, New York smells really bad. Okay, yeah. Why is that? Is because of that ki, like the so much conjunction of the people, like there are so many people actually living in, like basically is this thing na, like it's a very dense city, but probably you shouldn't supposed to be considered as one of the most dense city, means like that na, Bombay is one of the dense city, Tokyo is one of the dense city. Density means like that ki, like in square kilometer of area, how many people are actually living in that particular square kilometer of area. Okay, yeah, so we have almost like in India, in Bombay we have almost like a higher, one of the highest. Tokyo is also really one of the highest, means like that na, in square kilometer of area this might be 1,000 people actually living there. So this might be a kind of like a small problem. When you have in the New York, it might be like a 700 to 500, I'm not really sure, but it might be a little less. But the problem is that now, because of it has, New York has a very big building, it kind of like a something like that ki, the wind, the nature wind is not properly crossing that particular smell. What do you mean by that? Okay, so okay, if you went to the jungle, you smell something really jungly. Okay, yeah. What do you mean by that? Okay, yeah. like okay, it's very hard to explain this thing. Okay, yeah. Have you went to the jungle? First of all, is this thing I'm talking about such a jungle which is actually heavily lush. Okay, yeah. So have you went there? Like if you went there and if you went get inside the jungle, you actually feel little bit of smell, little bit of jungly things like that. I don't know, but it is okay, because like basically I went there, like basically one of which is actually closest to my, it's not really jungle, but it's kind of like somebody heavy lush, some sort of trees over there. Okay, which is also kind of like somebody giving the same equivalent vibe of kind of like somebody jungle. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to think that na ki, when you are in the jungle, okay, yeah, you will get little less sunlight. Okay, yeah. and as also you feel little bit of smell, little bit of jungly, something like that, I don't know, but yeah. And this is what actually happened is because of that key, the wind, the wind is kind of like a something very hard to kind of like a create any kind of like a something. There is no space, means like that na ki, like a basically in the there is when there is a kind of like a something very in like a take the desert. Okay, desert is a kind of like a simply plain where there is no kind of like a trees or nothing like that at all. So the wind can flow like a without any kind of like a some resistance, nothing really at all. But when the jungle is actually happened, then wind is kind of like a something disperse, is kind of like a something like it went upward, it went like basically it get lot of resistance, and because of it get lot of resistance, the wind doesn't really get that much chance to get inside the forest and remove that particular jungly smell and remove all those things. So yeah, so this is what same thing happened in the New York, means like that the New York is kind of like a simply filled with lot of big buildings. So that means na ki New York is doesn't really have any kind of like a simply wind, so that it would kind of like a take us and take the bad smell away with them. It no, okay, like basically it get lot of resistance from the building, this building to that building. So this is what kind of like that smell is always stay there. Okay, like basically let me tell you one thing now. Right now I'm living in India, it's a very tier 3 city. It's there is no kind of like a so much amount of building over here. But what I'm trying to tell you is this thing: if there is a kind of like a some animal would die, I feel little bit of smell. But probably if I went away from 100 meter, then I might not smell that. I might not smell that particular dead animal. Why? Because the wind is kind of like a doing the same thing, doing kind of like all the wind is kind of like a, something moving that particular dead animal smell away. Okay, because of the kind of like the gaps that we have here, it's kind of like a so much gaps that we have. That's why wind is kind of like a does not get that much resistance, so it went flow very easily with, and as also carrying all those dead animal smell. Okay, but in the New York it doesn't, because New York is kind of like a heavily dense with the people, and kind of like a dense with the kind of like a some building and stuff like that. It's like it smell it the dead animal smells stays over there for a very long period of time. So that's why New York smells really bad. Okay, yeah, but from design point of perspective, I really love it. I really love it. As also is this thing na ki in a New York doesn't really have any kind of like electric pole which is actually hanging out from the kind of like some little top. No, all those electric pole are underground. Water connection is also underground, which is really good. It kind of like a something like a like it felt really beautiful. It looks really beautiful, because in India you probably seen any kind of like some electric poles are kind of like overhead, means like that there is a pole, and that means like so many electric wires are there which kind of like a congested, and it's not look really beautiful. Okay, but in the New York is doesn't. In New York is kind of like a full with really good stuff. So yeah, what it my kind of like something one of the best design. Okay, yeah, I might think that na ki okay, New York does not kind of like a represent a ring city. Okay, like basically the ring city that I imagine as a kind of a perfect city, New York doesn't align with that particular ring city, because it has kind of like a simply block city, because there is a block. Okay, this block, that block, that block, that block. Okay, and as also is this thing na ki in the US. Okay, I'm not talking about just New York, but in US has a kind of like a something very special laws regarding about the city planning. Okay, yeah, they actually kind of like a something city in different, means like that ki they actually kind of like a something, the residential area should supposed to be stay in one side of the city, commercial area should supposed to be stay in another side of city, then industrial area, then office area should supposed to be like a basically they are kind of like a create some sort of sector regarding about where these people should supposed to be say. But the problem is that na ki the people who actually living in residential area, they really require some sort of milk or any kind of like egg or daily needs. They have to be go away from like a away, and then they get some, they went to commercial area and then they buy some sort of stuff and then they came home. So means like that now people are actually like basically what I'm trying to tell you, in India we are kind of like a something commercial area and residential area are so tightly in together, means like that if I need any egg or any kind of like a something milk or any kind of like a stuff, it kind of like a something just 100 or 200 meter away from me, which is like a kind of like a something very close by. Okay, yeah, but in US in US, it has a kind of like some laws that the residential area and commercial area should supposed to be stay away. So that means if I need a kind of like some egg or milk, I have to be go 1 or 2 kilometer or 3 kilometer or might be 5 to 10 kilometer away. Then I found kind of like a some store that I get eggs and things like that, and then I came home. That means when I'm going means like that I need a some sort of car, because like let me tell you one thing, like a 1 or 2 or 10 kilometer, like I won't be able to walk that. And so basically I need a car or I need a kind of like bike, so I took the bike. And so basically is this thing na ki I'm consuming full, I'm consuming kind of like some fuel which is kind of like a something for very less thing, like a for egg. Okay, yeah. So for the planning of the city planning, they might kind of like a thing that ki residential area and commercial area should supposed to be stay together, but for the commercial area should supposed to be create some sort of laws that they should supposed to be sell only daily needs. They shouldn't supposed to be sell any kind of like a some stuff that kind of like a something like a factory. They shouldn't supposed to build the factory at residential area. They shouldn't supposed to be build office in residential area. Like a residential area should supposed to be main for residential, like a people should supposed to be live there, and commercial means like that people who should supposed to be serve as a daily needs for the residential people. Okay, that's it. But in the US they have kind of like a something very different thing, but still they kind of like change their policy, and they kind of like include their daily needs kind of like a assembly store near the residential area. Yeah, but still. But one of the kind of like one of the greatest city design that I think which is actually really exist is a Paris. Okay, Paris is a kind of like something really good. Like the design of the city was really great. Like the Paris and the like the Eiffel is kind of like some center of the attraction. It kind of like a look really beautiful from every point of perspective. But the one of the biggest problem regarding about the Paris is that ki Paris is like I don't know, like let me tell you one thing. Usually cities represent some sort of infrastructure or some sort of people around there. Okay, yeah. And usually if I'm gonna say Paris means like that, if I'm living in the Paris, that means like that na ki I should supposed to be considered as you are the person who actually living in the Paris. That means you should supposed to be a rich person. And why? Because Paris are kind of like associated with such a image where only rich people should supposed to be stay there. Okay, yeah. And this kind of like some mentality which kind of like a convert in such a way where only rich people are kind of like a meant to be live there. Means like that if you are started living in the Paris, you can't afford, like basically the rent over there was extremely high, like literally extremely high. You could afford a kind of like a buy a house for yourself in the New York, but instead of living in a rent area in kind of like a some mainland Paris, which is like a really like you have to, if you wanted to live in Paris, that means you just have to live very far away from the Paris. Okay, means like that almost like a 50 to 40 kilometer away from the city, then you might have reasonable rate over there so that you could live in. But like a mainland Paris, it's like really difficult to live because it's super expensive, like literally like a I don't know, like I watched the kind of like a some documentary regarding about living in Paris, and I realized that the one day room for Paris in hotel is kind of like a so much expensive that you could afford almost like an entire week in US. Okay, yeah. So yeah, basically. But regarding about the city planning, it was like a really good, it's a really masterpiece, by the way. Like a Paris city is not just kind of like a somebody associated with the like a it belonged to a lot of history. Like a it like a Paris is kind of like a something city which is actually almost like a 400 500, like a basically this city is actually exists since 500 year or maybe before that too. So it is kind of like a this city is kind of like a live so many people, so many like a generation of the people who are actually living in there for 100 200 300 400 year, which is like a really insane amount of time. And in this particular period of time, this Paris is kind of like a developed so much. Develop means like that it's not kind of like it's completely developed, it's a kind of like a develop means like that ki the perception of the people change. Okay, means like that ki premium kind of like a people who should supposed to be live in Paris. So yeah, it might be so. I think that na ki like a the Paris should supposed to be like a, I don't know, like a basically the living in the Paris, like this is only one flaw that I'm kind of like a scene from the Paris is that the people can't afford to live in Paris because it's super expensive. But regarding about the design of that particular city was like really incredible. I love the design regarding about the homes, buildings, like their architecture was like, oh my god, masterpiece, dude. Like a literally like the buildings, like let me tell you one thing now. So all the buildings are like a far old, like a 200, 300, 400 year old, but their design, the architecture choice was like masterpiece, dude. Like I love the design of the building, I love the city was like really good. Like from every point of perspective, I never really went there, but like visually when I see a Paris, I just feel like that, wow, it is like a and by the way, Paris is a kind of like a some city where most of the tourists in all around the world came over there. Okay, yeah, because Paris is actually kind of like a called as the city of love. Okay, yeah, because the Paris is, I don't know why, but usually is this thing now. Most of people are kind of like a propose in front of Eiffel Tower. Why they actually kind of like a thing is a Paris is kind of like a romantic city, so something like that. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why they kind of like a somebody associate romance with the Paris, because let me tell you one thing: the Eiffel Tower is not meant to be kind of like a representing romance. It representing some sort of like a basically why they kind of like a build the Eiffel design is because of that ki they wanted to kind of like make their cities as something really like something really good. Okay, yeah. What kind of good means like that ki some sort of like a thing that makes it city special. Okay, means like that na ki in New York they have kind of like a Central Park. Okay, which kind of like a something creates its own value of that particular city. So this is what kind of like a Paris, the people of the Paris kind of like a thinking that ki they need a kind of like a some sort of monument to kind of like a somebody think that it's one of the kind, and Eiffel Tower is one of those. Okay, yeah. So yeah, probably. Dude, I'm talking about almost like a 56 minute. I should supposed to be end here. Alright, yeah. So this is my kind of like a assembly design in my mind regarding about one of the perfect city, but still perfect city is not kind of a perfect city because perfect city does not exist. Okay, yeah, like you could make your city as good as possible as you can from visual point of perspective, from ethical point of perspective, from social point of perspective, but still there is always be a flaw because city is not meant to be for one person. City is actually meant for multiple person. Okay, yeah, and that means multiple person means like that it comes with a dispute, it comes with a disagreement. Okay, yeah, because some people like this, some people like that. So yeah, cities never be perfect, never really at all. Okay, yeah, but you have to be make it improve from every point of perspective, and this is kind of like somebody is this thing, make the city as good as possible as you can. You can't make the perfect city, definitely not. Whatever. So this is my thought process regarding about the perfect city. All right, yeah. Okay, so I should put to end here. This is it, and thank you.